bill, which will slap a 12% value-added tax on non-resident digital service providers such as Netflix and Spotify.
Ang una ko pong reaksyon dyan, wrong timing. Kasi unang-una, masakit sa tenga na ang laging dahilan is kailangan ng dagdag na buwis para bayaran yung lumalaking utang. Sila yung utang ng utang, tapos tayo yung magpapasa ng pagbabayad.
Salcedo says all three measures are expected to yield around 47 billion pesos annually.
The digital tax bill inches closer to passage. The measure, which the House of Representatives just approved on third reading, will require foreign digital service providers to pay 12% value-added tax. But just how challenging will implementation be if and when this becomes law? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama po natin online sa Quezon City, Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5. And dito sa studio, kasama ko po Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, Bok. Anong balita?
Well, naglabas ng sampina against former Bucor Chief Gerald Bantag. It's not the same as an arrest warrant that has to be made clear. Actually, walang
Hindi naman natanggap.
Yeah, kahit matanggap naman niya, he doesn't even have to appear. Wala namang consequence except for the possibility na hindi mo-consider ang kanyang defense when the PI proceeds.
Okay. So, you made that point na iba pa yan. But therefore, kung nandyan na tayo, how far is that from an actual arrest warrant?
Depende muna kung magdedesisyon yung preliminary investigation that there is probable cause. After which they issue a resolution if they do find probable cause and submit it to the judge. The judge again makes a decision on whether or not may probable cause nga. At if the judge finds there was probable cause, then he will issue a warrant.
Okay.
So there's the two-step
yan ang mga katanungan. Pero Luchi, ang mas interesado ako sa mga misteryo eh. Ano bang mga lumalabas sa anggulo? Yung hukay na yan sa bilibid. Ano ba nababalita mo? Para saan yung hukay na yan?
Gold nga, sabi ko sa'yo. Yun nga ngayon ang ini-explore nila. That actually, gold. Treasure there, Yamashita pa raw. O, di ba, Ed?
Lahat naman kasi tinatawag na Yamashita eh. Kahit si Homa yung nagkukay, si Yamashita pa rin ang sinisisi. Matagal na. Anyway. Si Yamamoto rin masisi.
Anyway, so mamaya ay wala po tayong pag-uusapan ngayon. I mean, we got that out of the way because obviously nasa balita yan. But today we'll be speaking about COVID and as well as this new digital tax. We will speak to our first guest after a short break. Keep it right here on One News. Welcome back, the Chiefs. Like we said, we'll talk about the digital tax bill later on. But we start with the current COVID situation. Some things to talk about there. Are there some variants we need to watch out for? Have we reached endemicity? Let's ask our first guest, infectious disease expert, Dr. Rontgene Solante. Good evening, Doc. Welcome back to the Chiefs.
Hi, Roby. Good morning. Good evening.
Sir, umpisa ko lang
Good evening, Doc.
umpisa ko lang dito because we talked about it a bit kanina with Dr. Edsel Salvania sa The Big Story. Parang people are now starting to more explicitly at least have a conversation about whether or not we are nearing endemicity. Ano pong sa tingin nyo? And what might that mean?
Well, the cases that we have recorded for the last 3 to 4 weeks is quite significant in terms of the downtrend. And downtrending is one essential metrics wherein you will be considering that maybe we have managed and we were able to brave the storm of BA4 and BA5. And we're just talking here of a variant that has been with us for the past 6 months. But we don't know yet what the other variants are coming in. But again, even despite the fact that 1 month or 2 months ago, we have cases like 3,000 or 4,000, but our hospitalization rate is still very low. So what does that mean? That means that we're dealing with a virus that is causing us only mild symptoms. Even a lot of patients are having the positivity, but we know that they're not going to the hospital. But probably we're going to that point of endemicity. But with that situation, we still need to continue with the health protocol, with the vaccination and the antiviral agents.
Pero sir,
Are
until
you
when?
still hoping that vaccination rates are going to go up at this point? Especially because, there's been a declaration that we seem to be approaching endemicity. How do you convince people that there is still a need to take boosters or be vaccinated if they have not been vaccinated to begin with?
That's a very big challenge for the government to convince people to get the vaccine because of fatigue, because of vaccine trust, because of hesitancy. Pero nakikita ko dito, if the government cannot really rally the whole population to get the vaccine, then I would say let's focus on the vulnerable population because this is where the vulnerable population will really benefit with vaccines. Maski sasabihin pa natin by January, February, tataas ang mga kaso, I don't think the healthcare utilization will really be increased, no? Pero protektahan natin ang mga vulnerable population. And what we're seeing now in hospitals at saka konti na lang, ito pa rin mga vulnerable population. So, halimbawa, if the government is planning to get the bivalent vaccine, I would say voluntary for those who want it, but mandatory for the vulnerable population.
Doc, I understand.
Mandatory pa rin.
Doc,
Go ahead, Ed.
I understand what you're saying na we may be headed now for endemic stage. Pero I'm trying to get a grasp as to where exactly we are. Kasi getting there can mean 1 month to 1 year. We've been talking about endemicity for the last year and a half already. So where are we exactly, and by what time can we say na we are at the endemic stage? And if we get there, does that mean you can let go of protocols? Or hindi pa rin?
Hindi. And ganito yan, Ed. No? Ang tingin ng mga bansa ngayon, we will never get to the endemic period unless there is really total absence of the threat of the variants of concern. Kaya makikita mo, even in the United States now, they extended their public health emergency. Why? Because they are anticipating that by fall, the BQ.1.1 will be causing more of the cases. And on that note, paano na lang pag i-lift nila yung public health emergency? Yung procurement ng gamot, may bayad na yan. Yung mga bakuna, may bayad na yan. So the health experts in the US are really rallying not to take out the public health emergency because there are a lot of benefits with the public health emergency and with the threat of the variants of concern, especially the BQ.1.1 na darating tumataas na ngayon. In fact, the last data I had last night, in the US, it's already causing 30% of the total na mga na-survey nila na mga sa variant, no? And we cannot discount that possibility that it will also be here in the Philippines, no? Because of the travel and especially maraming uuwi ngayong December coming from the US or from those here going to the US, babalik, no? So for me, we are in the state of the pandemic wherein cases are going down, the deaths are going down, but we cannot say we are endemic at this point.
Yes, sir. Pero, sir,
How
it
is that
sounds...
BQ 1.1? Is that more virulent? Is that a subvariant of Omicron? Are we in the stage where we're just observing muna, ano ba to, malala ba to, or it's just one of those flu-like COVID condition? How would you describe it right now?
Yes, the BQ.1, 1.1 is sublineage pa rin ng Omicron. But there are preliminary data, Luchi, na they tested patients, no? Yung mga nabakunahan, yung mga na-booster, yung mga nagka-infection plus the booster, and they found out mababa ang neutralizing antibody na effective against BQ.1, 1.1 compared to BA5. So, ibig sabihin, this subvariant can be more immune evasive compared to BA.5. And you can just imagine that. Nabakunahan ka na, magka-infect ka pa rin. But ang maganda lang, yung hospitalization rate in these countries, hindi tumaas.
Okay.
Which means, para rin siyang Omicron in the sense of pwede mong i-treat sa bahay, hindi naman siya nauuwi sa yung grabing kondisyon na kailangan na i-intubate or i-hospitalize.
Yes, correct. You're totally correct there, no? Pero we need to give caution also, no? Baka sasabihin ng mga nakikinig sa atin, okay lang tayo mag-December maski may big one kasi sabi naman ni Ma'am Luchi na mild lang yan. But we cannot equate that to the vulnerable population because vulnerable population, especially those with hypertension, with diabetes, who are immunocompromised, they're the ones that will really be suffering and going into severe infection. So I think we need to be still vigilant. Pag halimbawa, tinatanong ako, anong mangyari sa atin sa Christmas? Can we still celebrate? Can we still have parties? Yes, you can do those things that we haven't done for the past 2 years. But protect your vulnerable parents, your lola, your lolo, those with comorbidities. Kung mag-karaoke kayo sa bahay, pwede nyo silang pasali, pero mag-face mask sila. Pag kumakain lahat na sabay-sabay, sana naman you have to make a place na hindi sila kasama doon sa mga maraming tao. I think we need to define something here na paano natin mailagay itong vulnerable population at a less vulnerable situation.
In the meantime, Doc, I mean, we know, and you've kept saying this, wala namang health crisis na pareho. It's always different. For that matter, no pandemic pandemics are not alike. Nonetheless, take us back in history, whether something as recent as SARS-CoV or something a century ago like the Spanish flu. If we look at history, what have we learned in terms of how societies eventually exit from that situation?
Well, Roby, that's a good question, no? Pero I would like to say that this type of virus is totally different from the Spanish flu, totally different from SARS-CoV-1, and including MERS-CoV-1. Why? Because this virus is giving us much problem because it keeps mutating and mutating and mutating. And this is the first time that we have seen this type of RNA virus that mutates faster than we thought. That I think this has evaded the science of mutation na ang bilis niyang mag-mutate, no? Na hindi natin maintindihan bakit ganito. And in fact, may mga nagsasabi, baka naman genetically talagang sinasadya. But no, I don't think. It's really the behavior of this virus na talagang mag-mutate to the point to its advantage that will make the virus can transmit to another person even with vaccine. So I cannot really relate any pandemic na ganito katagal, ganito ka lingering at ganito ka taas ang threat every now and then because of that mutations.
Sir, sir, in real and practical terms, sir, we are nowhere near endemic stage. Tama ho ba? Kasi I'd like to clarify kasi when Dr. Salvania said na we are getting there or we are approaching endemic stage, people suddenly thought na parang eto na tayo, malapit na tayo. Pero as it turns out, parang malayo pa.
Well, I don't see I cannot see kung kailan, 2 months, 3 months. Alam mo, Ed, gusto nating mag-end ang pandemic, gusto nating maging endemic, kagaya ng influenza. But the BQ.1, what after the BQ.1? Another BF7 or
Yes, sir.
what?
All the variants.
B8.5 plus another mutations. It's so difficult to predict, no? Kaya ang palagi kong sinasabi sa mga tao, magtatanong sa akin, for you to be protected, just wear your face mask. Maski sasabihin ng gobyerno, optional. Well, that optional is your choice, that you have to be protected. Especially if you have diabetes, if you have hypertension, because we don't know what will happen to you.
Okay, so what about if we move into a phase where it's still there, it will never go away, but a vaccine will sufficiently protect us from it? Isn't that a state also of endemicity?
Yes. Ang nakita ko lang dito, if we want to treat this as something endemic, which I think parang ganun ang nangyayari ngayon because we did not already, we let people go out, we let the capacity 100%. Parang ganun ang ginagawa natin na endemic, no? But again, at that instance, talagang dapat nandun yung programa ng gobyerno. Ano ba ang next natin ng mga bakuna? Will we be receiving the next vaccine next year? Will it be the bivalent vaccine? There should be in place, there should be health facility readiness in terms of kung tataas ang mga kaso pero hindi na tayo magla-lockdown. And of course, yung management ng mga vulnerable, that they have to have good access doon sa antivirals. And the US, UK, and other developed countries are so confident that they open everything. They don't require masks in public places, indoor and outdoor, because they're so confident. They have treatment, they have facilities to take care of their people.
Doc, to that point, yung sa treatment, I do remember you saying, kung may access ba tayo sa drugs katulad ng Paxlovid and so on, di mas kampante rin tayo. Bukod pa sa bakuna, bukod sa health facilities natin. So, kamusta na nga ba? Kamusta na nga ba yung yung access, but more importantly, the affordability?
Well, alam mo, Robbie, that's the problem now because in terms of affordability, all of these are still out of pocket of the Filipino people, the Juan and Juana. And there is no single entity in the government that giving this for free, no? Unless na talagang ma-admit ka sa isang hospital and this is available in the hospital. But as an outpatient treatment, kailangan mo talagang mag-shell out. How much the molnupiravir cost? Between 3,000 to 4,000. Paxlovid, I don't think they can lower the price to less than 10,000. So these are still really prohibitive. And I think for me, if the government really intends to make this something na endemic, we need to balance that by having these antiviral drugs available and accessible to the population.
Hi, Doc, just for reference, nabanggit nyo, molnupiravir at Paxlovid. Magkano po ba sa Estados Unidos ngayon yan and for that matter, in our neighboring countries kung available doon?
Ang estimate ng let's take a look Paxlovid, no? Ang estimate cost niyan is between, kung i-convert natin to dollars, it's between like 15 to 20,000 ang isang course. So
dito sa Pilipinas.
Yeah, that's the equivalent to the pesos. No?
But so, how much is it? How much is it to let's say American citizens living in America? And for that matter, kung if available in our neighboring countries like Singapore, Thailand, do we know kung magkano sa kanila?
It's free. It's free in their country. It's free.
Wow. So the subsidy is complete, no?
Do you know that drug in countries in outside of our country is procured by the government and given by the government free to the people?
Isn't there any plan to do that here? That's one. And also the bivalent. Is that something that can be made available to us considering that many of us were vaccinated a year or so ago, and most likely wala na yung epekto nun, and we're not even into the second booster yet, no? Is it good to shift now to bivalent? And if we do, is that going to come to us for free? Are there plans to do that?
These are my two thoughts on the bivalent, no? Unang-una, yung nakikitang data is more or less may konting advantage siya, no, in terms of the neutralizing antibody. But the problem with the bivalent, wala silang mga clinical effectiveness data. And that's why the WHO recommended that while waiting for the bivalent, we will continue with the current platform, which can also protect us from severe disease. Now, if this bivalent vaccine will be available, then I would say prioritize the vulnerable population, because I can surmise it may not be as voluminous in terms of volume, no? So dapat i-prioritize natin ang vulnerable population, and it should be free because it will still be under an EUA agreement.
EUA.
Yes.
Pero,
So
sir,
what's the
sir,
difference between bivalent and all the other vaccines that we used to have?
Okay.
What's the advantage?
Yes, the bivalent, that's the reason why it's called bivalent, no? So it's two-valent, meaning it has the original Wuhan strain and the Omicron B.4, B.5. So ibig sabihin niyan, doon sa mga data, mas mataas ang neutralizing antibody niya doon sa B4 and B5. But we don't know yet kung the protection it will give against severe infection is the same as that with the current platform. But most experts are telling us that it may be the same or it may be marginally higher than the current platform. So, for example, I'm in the Philippines. I don't have budget for a bivalent, but what I have now is the current vaccine. Kung ganun ang scenario natin, edi gamitin muna natin itong mga bakuna available, and then we will wait kung darating yung bivalent vaccine, and then let's give it to the vulnerable population.
Pero sir, in the meantime, what's the hold-up in the processing and the purchase of the bivalent vaccines? For example, Pfizer. And then of course, you also have Moderna. Sabi sa amin ng Moderna, for example, by November dapat available na sa atin yan . Pero it was up to the government to acquire, well, of course, process first and then acquire the bivalent vaccines.
Ang nakita ko lang dito, Ed, yung proseso na lang, no? So may mga dadaan kasi ang mga proseso, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 processes. So hindi natin alam kung at what number na sila, number 3, number 4, or number 5. So we need to wait. Kasi alam mo naman na pag ganitong mga klaseng bakuna, dadaan pa rin sa proseso in terms of procurement.
But are we having any problems in the processing with whether it's Pfizer or Moderna?
Wala naman sigurong problema dahil I think the supply is there. It's just a matter of yung mga technicalities siguro ang nakikita ko lang dito na kailangang i-polish, and hopefully I'm so hopeful na before the end of the year sana maging available na siya.
Doc, how is the fact that there is still a provisional Secretary of Health right now as we speak, and there's no appointment yet for a permanent health secretary? How is that affecting our COVID management at the moment, and in general, our health situation?
It's a big factor, Luchi, no? Because yun nga lang, yung sa mga procurement na itong mga bakuna under EUA, yung mga processing of other mga kailangan natin ngayon, there are provisions na I think there are more what they call this responsibility na magagawa ang SOH over that of an OIC. So I think mas maganda pa rin na makakuha na ng SOH ngayon para naman ma-polish na natin itong mga procurement and all the other provisions na kailangan ng Department of Health. Pero ang pinaka-importante dito, what direction will the government be in terms of the health ng bansa natin? And we will only know that if we have an SOH, because the responsibility there, the function will really be different. when you have an SOH over that of an OIC.
Sir, pasensya na, i-clarify ko lang po because we've had other people, including the current OIC, Dr. Vergere, or Undersecretary Vergere, saying na, hindi, actually wala naman pagkakaiba. I can do the strategic plan, I can actually appoint people, we can provide direction, but if we're hearing you right, you're saying that actually no, that's not true. There are limitations and iba pa rin. I mean, even given, I mean, we have to say it does seem like Undersecretary Vergere has the full confidence of President Bongbong Marcos. Pero you're saying iba pa rin yun?
Of course, Robbie, magtingin ka lang sa mga corporate world, ang OIC versus the designated president will really be different because when you're an OIC, hindi ka makaplano. Ano ba yung 5-year plan mo? Because you don't know after the second year or third year, papalitan ka. Yung roadmap, ang importante dito yung roadmap ng tatahakin ng Department of Health for the health sector ng society natin. Like for example, if you're planning for the emerging and re-emerging infection, long-term naman yan, hindi naman nang pwedeng 1 year or 2 years lang yan. Can an OIC do that? No? Hindi naman niya alam kung after 1 year, 2 years, matanggal siya. So where's the continuity? Number 2, yung mga staff niyang kailangan susuportahan siya. He needs somebody or he needs people that will really be there for him for the next 6 years. And importante din yan kung sino yun sila. And you cannot just appoint somebody just being an OIC.
Pero Doc, in particular, is there any hesitation on the part of any of the drug manufacturers or the manufacturers of vaccines for COVID-19 in terms of dealing or contracting with the government because of the fact that our health secretary is actually an OIC?
Well, I would totally agree with you on that statement, Ed, no? And you perfectly said that, no? Because there are pharmaceutical companies that are so sensitive about yung sinong pipirma, no? O sinong hindi pipirma. Because alam mo naman yung mga legalities on that, no? So I am not just so sure how accurate is this, pero nakikita ko rin yan. May mga hesitations ng mga pharma companies to do that if you are just an OIC compared to an SOH.
But is it, sir, for example, affecting our purchase or processing of vaccines for COVID-19? I'm sorry if I'm getting so detailed, pero just in case you're free to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know how it will affect the processing, pero hindi naman ganun siguro ka-major. It's only minor, mga tweaks lang siguro yan. Pero for me, it's really important that we have an SOH now because this is the first time medyo ganito katagal. OIC pa rin ang natin, Secretary of Health, no? So we need somebody to be there. Not because hindi natin gusto ang mag-OIC, pero for an agency that is so vital and that is so important, especially with problems related with health. I think we need someone there to really guide us.
Sir, let me throw in another example, follow through lang.
First quarter, sorry,
Luchi.
Just a quick one. Do you think, for example, that appointing a Secretary of Health by at the latest the first quarter of next year, is that too late?
I don't think
how soon should this be done?
I don't think
that the COVID situation and the vaccination that may be needed in order to avert a BQ 1.1 if ever it came to a situation where it becomes a real emergency again, God forbid.
Yeah, Luchi, it's not just about COVID that we're talking about. Why we need an SOH? Because we need to concretize ano ba ang magiging roadmap ng Department of Health in terms of prevention, in terms of the services, in terms of long-term plans, no? Especially what's lurking now is the UHC, yung universal healthcare, and strengthening our response in readiness to emerging and re-emerging infections, strengthening the healthcare facilities. Dapat naman siguro meron kang SOH para lang ma-prioritize and then at that instance, ma-concretize natin kung saan na tayo at this point in time.
Doc, let me just take the counter thinking on that. At least, kasi parang isn't the confidence of the president. I mean, you have cabinet level officers always saying, "I serve at the pleasure of the president." And people who know how politics and governance works in the Philippines also know that, they said, to lang naman, dysfunctional dito. It can be so dysfunctional, it can be so dysfunctional, that even permanent appointments really don't know how long they're gonna last. Di po ba? I mean, you could have a permanent secretary confirmed by the Commission on Appointments, and yet you never know. 3 months down the line, there are departments na paikot-ikot, papalit-palit, and so on. On the other hand, you have a current situation where, as we said, let's grant that it looks like na magkasundo naman ang OIC and the President. Isn't the confidence of the President the stabilizing force here?
Ganito ang sagot ko niyan. When you elect someone that is SOH and that SOH is really committed in terms of helping the country, mas sa tingin ko this is my personal opinion. If you will be put there as an SOH, mas konkreto yung plano mo because you know that you will be under only like 6 years. So I need to build up what I should be looking at and what should I be prioritizing within 6 years. Regardless kung hanggang tanggalin ba niya ako 2 years, 3 years, but ito yung blueprint ko. Parang architect ako sa bahay. Ito yung blueprint ko. Ito yung mangyayari during the first year. Ito yung mangyayari during the second year, during the third year. So I mean, I will be there all throughout the course of my plan, and I should have that urgency to really put all those plans at magawa ko yan compared to an OIC na magagawa din naman siguro niya yan, pero mas nandun yung urgency. You are there as binigyan ka ganitong responsibility.
Doc, we do understand what you're saying, especially as you stress that it's not just about COVID, it's about a lot of other health issues that a permanent health secretary will have to attend to. Pero, balik ko lang sa COVID and following through particularly on Ed's question. Theoretical lang. But is it possible that the absence of a permanent secretary at this point is affecting, let's say, for example, one problem that you've identified, yung molnupiravir, yung Paxlovid, a direct or even indirect manifestation of what we're talking about, of not having a permanent secretary providing direction and providing at least some vision for how these drugs in particular should be used and handled?
Okay, yung availability ng drugs at saka yung accessibility are manageable, and I think an OIC can really can manage that. Can handle that, but there are a lot of things beyond that in terms of, number one, sustainability. How will you be able to look into sustainability of the healthcare system natin? Number two, how can we make the healthcare system improve in terms of service? No, malaki ang kailangan natin doon, no? And it's not just about COVID. It's not just about availability of means, but how can we sustain and improve on our health system and health services na talagang every one and one they can feel na meron palang DOH.
Okay, Dr. Rontgene Solante, sir, always a pleasure. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you,
Doc.
Thank you, Doc. Ingat po.
Thank you.
And we will start up another conversation after the break. Please stay with the Chiefs.
Welcome back to the Chief Show on One News. Some interesting points kanina from Dr. Rontgene Solante.
Alam mo, yung this whole thing about yung OIC sa Department of Health in particular, we've been having that conversation, on and off. Like I always say, parang,
On and on and on.
hindi naman. But I mean, like we always said, di ba? Parang we do always preface it na mukhang may confidence naman si President Marcos kay Undersecretary Vergere. But there's always that question, mukhang divided eh. Pag minsan meron mga nagsasabi na, wala namang problema dyan. You're making a mountain out of a molehill.
But those are the people who are expected to say that too. People in DOH, for example, expected to say that.
Well, let's not forget that they just appointed Yusek Tayag, Yusek na siya, and then a couple of weeks ago, they appointed, sino nga yung military guy? As USEC also. Health, no?
At least si Tayag naging USEC na rin.
Na-fill up. So the question really is, what's the problem with Secretary of Health position? No? But why is that taking so long? To me, that's the question on my mind. Diba?
But ang sa akin, what I really appreciate...
May naantay ba? Baka naman may naantay na...
Ang sabi ni BBM, di ba, inaantay niya mag-settle down yung COVID pandemic before he appoints Secretary of Health? Which is parang counterintuitive for a lot of people.
Matagal pa yun, natin alam eh. Paano, diba?
But ako, what I really appreciate, other than the question of gaano katagal pa and what is taking so long, is just the insights from people who have been working in the public health sector for a long time, and their insights on what's the difference, diba? And they're essentially saying that stability or confidence in stability counts for a lot in terms of being able to and then to your question, Ed, diba? Parang lumalabas na meron din mga technicalities na baka hindi natin maiwasan.
Ito nga, sabi ni Rontgene kanina inevitably, there are some companies, especially the big companies, they would prefer to deal with somebody who's permanent than somebody who's an OIC. Kasi somebody who's an OIC, of course, that basically means pwede kang palitan anytime.
Agreements there, di ba? Siyempre, yung mga agreements lined out in the contracts. Diba? Will have
and
to be
these
honored.
are sensitive agreements.
There has to be
may indemnity clauses
specific person, who's still there. Diba? Ang hirap pag OIC. Siyempre, wala kang sense of full commitment of permanence.
Accountability.
You don't have that, but yung tanong ko is, officially, kung OIC, pwede ba pumirma? Can she enter into a contract, for example?
We've talked to some people in the DOH who said na yes, pwedeng pumirma. But that's an assumption na papayag yung kabila.
I see.
Yun eh. It's the other party.
On behalf of the government,
it's the contracting party that has a problem with that.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic for tonight, a bill aimed at taxing digital service providers like Netflix and Spotify and Viva Max.
And that affects me.
Has passed the House on third and final reading. What are the pros and cons of this bill? Giving us his insights is tax expert Mr. Mon Abrea. He's also the founding chairman and chief tax advisor of Asian Consulting Group, Mr. Mon Abrea. Sir, magandang gabi and thank you for joining us tonight.
Magandang gabi, sir.
Magandang gabi po.
Good evening, good morning from Cambridge.
Oh, you're in Cambridge?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sir, thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Sir, let's start off with this. HB 4122, taxing foreign digital service providers like Netflix, etc., etc. Of course, any tax measure is welcome by the government, but at the same time, you have always a pushback from consumers. Your thoughts on this particular bill?
Number one, it's wrong timing. Number two, it's not even the best strategy to address inflation. And number three, I don't think they did their homework or they did research. There's a pending proposal now at the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Their main objective is to actually help developing countries to generate taxes from these tech giants. And they are not proposing a VAT, they're imposing a share, meaning a global minimum corporate tax. The proposed House Bill 4122 is not taxing the tech giants. it's burdening the local
Taxing the
consumers
consumers.
and subscribers because it will be passed on to us.
For sure,
So
right?
sablay.
For sure. Oo.
Yes, Ma'am
Yeah, it
Luchi.
will be
Sablay
passed
siya.
on, no? Oo.
Sablay siya. Pangalawa, they're projecting 19 billion. Are we honestly wasting our time for a bill that will generate 19 billion?
Oo.
Kulang pa sa confidential funds nila yan.
Okay. Sir, atras muna ako ng konti. I just want something even more basic. What do they mean by digital service providers? Like in our stories, we keep referring to Netflix and Spotify as examples. But
Streaming
how
services.
narrow or how wide is the definition of a digital service providers, and what are other aspects to our current lives that might be affected?
Actually, it's a broad definition. We are just familiar with Netflix, Spotify, but it's actually anything that is digital platforms or technology-driven. And they're referring primarily to these non-resident foreign corporations, na mga those who are registered in the U.S. But even the U.S. is faced with that problem because even Facebook is not paying enough taxes in the U.S. because they are profit shifting it to Ireland, which is a tax haven. And that's exactly my point. The bill is totally not addressing any problem. It's creating another problem that is burdening our people amidst inflation. Ang taas lang nga ng presyo, dagdagan mo pa yung pinaglilibangan ng mga tao. So I don't honestly understand or see any wisdom in House Bill 4122. So we urge our Senate to really think through. But obviously Congress didn't think. So might as well ask the Senate to really make sure that they be more circumspect on this. Kasi ang laki ng potential na makukolekta eh. If only we can tax the tech giants. Not a 12% VAT. Trabahong tamad dyan. And honestly, how do we implement that? With the bank secrecy, with the lack of technology, we will rely on the data, on the submission of these tech giants. Why will they tell us how much they're making here?
Exactly, yeah. Oo. Kasi, di ba, their customers are people like us. Private people. Di ba? How would they know? I mean, they can have another book to show another set of customers, much less, di ba? Parang, yun din ang tanong ko, paano nila malalaman yan, di ba? The information will come from the provider themselves, and buti na lang kung sabihin nila yung totoo, right?
Exactly.
Ang tanong ko naman dito is, are they not anticipating also that if they, syempre, kung may pass-on cost, ang daming hindi na magsusubscribe, di ba? So doesn't that defeat the purpose? I mean, because it entails what? Another probably 100 peso, di ba? Additional cost, for example, for the monthly Netflix subscription. Malaking bagay yung 100 na yun, di ba? Kasi ngayon, nabibigatan na nga tayong lahat sa current cost, which is about 500, if I'm not mistaken, di ba? Hindi ba maraming, I mean, counterproductive kasi, ang dami na lang, hindi na lang mag-Netflix, right? So, ganun din. I mean, if they were to be honest about it, how much will it really add to the national coffers if they do that?
Agree.
Does that mean?
Baka even less than 19 billion pa yung makolect nila. But actually, you have a point. And also on that, let's also not forget that there are many Filipinos who are not even subscribing, but they are able to access these movies or series. So, I mean, are we encouraging more Filipinos?
Si Ed Lingao yata kasama dyan.
Yung mga may hawak ng passport ko sa Netflix, hati-hati tayo, ha?
See, I mean, knowing Filipinos, Ma'am Luchi, we have a lot of means and ways to go around this. So,
okay,
I just
but of
hope that...
course, the other point though, Mon, is yung mga local, tinatax. So unfair daw yun. Diba, yung mga I Want TV, diba, yung mga ganyan, nagbabayad lahat yun.
Viva Max.
Ng
Viva
tax.
Max.
So
Yeah.
parang ang point din nila is, bakit yun? Tinatax namin. Tapos yung mga non-resident, hindi namin itax.
Now I will go back, Ma'am Luchi, to the objectives of this House Bill 4122. They want to level the playing field. You know, when you level the playing field, it doesn't mean you have to mirror the taxation. The traditional businesses are made differently from the online or e-commerce. Dapat nga yung bill, pinoprotektahan yung e-commerce. They should be encouraging more e-commerce businesses. Yes. Therefore, instead of plain 12% VAT, even Viva Max, I Want TV, there should be a separate tax. in the European countries, what they implemented is a digital service tax, which is only 3%. You can Google this. France, Italy, 3% lang, and it is not a pass-on. It is a direct collection from the companies. So whether it's local or international, wag nating ipilit na dahil may 12% VAT yung binili mo sa grocery, 12% VAT yung online. They are totally different. You cannot just mirror it. Progressive na pag-iisip ba yun? Ito, 12% VAT lahat, hindi 12% natin lahat. Bakit? Kayo ba nagbabayad sa Kongreso? I mean, do not just pass it on us. Trabahong tamad eh. We have to be more, this is the future. E-commerce is the future. Therefore, our taxation should be more progressive and should really be suit enough to collect enough taxes. Hindi yung suntok sa buwan, hindi mo alam paano mo makokolekta. Diba?
Pero sa ibang bansa raw, in-implement na raw yan. Like sa Vietnam, I think Singapore, na
Thailand,
nagbabayad
Indonesia.
daw talaga ng tax. Is that true?
Yes, I think a lot of countries, as I've said, even European countries have implemented their different versions of digital tax. Ang sa atin lang kasi, Ma'am Luchi, it's not a different version. It's a continuation of VAT law. It's broadening the scope. Take note, House Bill 4122 is not a new law. It's revising the coverage, the scope of our VAT law. It's not even a digital tax. It's an extension. It's just saying, oy, may VAT din yan.
Yes.
In the meantime,
Diba? Ang hirap ng trabaho nila.
in the meantime, sir, you did mention a conversation to be had or that is ongoing at the level of the OECD. Speak to that. I mean, is that the proper way of doing this? Because we look at all these tech giants, they're all around us, and yet they are so nebulous when it comes to, having their fair share in their impact in our societies. Is that the proper way of doing it, to tackle this on a global and international level?
I honestly think so, because we need international cooperation. I mean, this is not even registered in our country. So I guess the first challenge there is how to make them register and pay our basic income tax. But since OECD is already discussing it, there are two pillars, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. The proposal is simple. Regardless where they are registered, as long as they generate income from wherever country around the world, they will have to pay. And that is what we call the global minimum tax. And they are proposing 15%. We don't need to abide with that. We don't need to follow it. But that will give us an idea how we should be taxing them. And the number two, talagang hindi lang global minimum tax. Talagang i-require sila na hindi ka pwedeng kumita sa kahit saan bansa, especially among developing countries in this time of crisis, na wala kang binabayad doon sa bansa kung saan ka kumikita. So I guess it will also help address the possible global tax evasion wherein they all go to tax havens, diba? And we know that even in the Philippines, there are those operating in our country but are not declaring their profit here. And that's exactly what happened to Uber. That's why Uber is out of Southeast Asia, because they are all over Southeast Asia, but their income were declared in Ireland or in some other tax havens. So the OECD proposal has so much wisdom and ideas. Again, we don't need to follow it if we don't want to, because we're not even member of OECD, parang ICC yan. In-excommunicado natin yung sarili natin. We're very independent, We're very powerful, So we don't want to be part of it. But, this is something that will help us.
Pero how, sir, does that work in global minimum tax? I mean, to begin with, we don't have any idea how much they're earning from, for example, Philippine sales. How does, theoretically, 15%, how does that work? How is that taxed? And who gets it, and how is it remitted to the Philippines?
Yes, part of the agreement is the exchange of information, which means from their headquarters to all countries where they are operating, this information will be shared to all concerned countries. So that if they don't pay in that country, or let's say tax haven yung pinagdeklaran nila, then the tax that should have been paid in that tax haven will be paid to the headquarters. Or if in the Philippines, 12% lang yung siningil natin, then the remaining 3% will also be paid to the headquarters. In short, there will be full transparency kahit saan ka mag-register. Yun yung point doon. Hindi na makakapagtago. Wala na yung base erosion and profit shifting. Or yung sabi namin BEPS, technically among tax experts, na the BEPS will no longer be a threat to developing countries, because they will be forced to declare it anyway. And if they don't declare, their headquarters or the country where they are registered will be the one to share the information.
No, what's in it for them? Why will they comply?
Are you referring
Yeah,
to the
in that OECD setup, what's in it for the digital provider? Why would they comply? Why would they report? Why would they? Yeah. What's the sanction if they don't comply?
Well, other than the fact that they will face a criminal case in different countries, the point is whether they pay in the Philippines or not, they will have to pay that amount. So mamimili lang sila saan nila gustong bayaran. Unlike now, they're not really paying anything.
Okay. So
that's
just to
actually
eliminate
helping as
the
well.
tax haven option. Parang ganon.
Yes. Or what we call the global tax evasion now.
Sir, last question from me, sir. A while ago, we were talking about how other countries in the region have already started taxing and how we are not taxing with new taxes because we just expanded VAT. Pero, for example, Vietnam or Thailand, how did they tax Netflix?
Actually, I'm not familiar how Vietnam taxed it, but because the research that I've read are mostly European countries that implemented the digital service tax. I'm not sure if they also expanded their service tax or gross receipt tax, or they created their new tax. But in the OECD research, almost all European countries who have either adopted, implemented, or will implement their digital service tax, more or less, nasa 3 to 7% yung mga rates na in-impose nila.
Balikan ko lang yung tanong ni Luchi na, what's in it for them to comply. But I want to ask it in the context of the tax havens. How do we make sure, and what's in it for them? Because basically, it disrupts their business model, and it's potentially a slippery slope for them, diba? They start, let's face it, this is not the only opaque industry, and this is precisely why tax havens exist.
So, for instance, in Ireland, if they do not impose the 15% global minimum tax as proposed by OECD, assuming they only impose 5%, so the balance, the 10%, will be collected by the headquarters or the country where the headquarters is registered. So in short, they will be forced to pay it anyway. So it's now the option of the tax haven or the country. Will you comply with the minimum, or you let other countries collect the difference? Because whether
they lose
are
it also.
registered, it will be collected. That's
the pressure will be on them.
Proposal.
Yes.
Yes.
So
And
either
remember that the exchange of information is powerful because this will be all over the world.
Yeah, and it is the OECD, that's true. Okay, sir, maraming salamat po sa oras niyo.
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Ingat po.
Tax expert Mr. Mon Abrea. And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes, News 5.
I'm Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.